You
can't even drink clean water. How we supposed to drink water?
Parchman Prison sits in the heart of the Mississippi Delta.
Look at the trash.
Over a century, it's earned a reputation for racism, brutality, and neglect.
We need some help in here! We need some help in here!
These scenes of a system already in crisis were captured before the global spread of COVID-19.
How many people have to die in this place before something is done about it?
Prisoners are dying at alarming rates, and conditions are spiraling out of control.
No water. No, we look.
Inmates use smuggled cell phones to send distress signals.
We need help.
And document the conditions they're living in.
No mat, no toothbrush, no soap, no food.
It's a living monument to the horrors of America's worst prisons and the lasting legacy of slavery.
Who are we supposed to cry to? Who are we supposed to call on when things are like this?
Which begs the question, how can you fight for your right to basic human dignity when you're locked up in prison?
Now the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen.
On the first day of 2020, Mississippi's prison system was in the middle of an uprising.
We ain't got no power. We ain't got no water. We can't see. We can't eat.
After a major storm, years of neglect, staffing shortages, and gang violence hit a tipping point. In January alone, 13 people died in Mississippi prisons. 6 of those deaths were homicides, 3 were listed as suicides, and the others were from natural causes. Walter Keon Gates was the first person to die in the new year. He was 25 years old. This is his mom, Britannia.
I was told that he was stabbed with every knife, butcher knife that you can think of. Actually, I didn't even get a phone call. If it wasn't from the inmates, inboxing my son and my cousins and everything, and them calling me and letting me know what happened, I still wouldn't have known that my son was dead. And the only thing that the chaplain could tell me when I called the next morning was, well, I do apologize for your loss, ma'am, but, we want to know where to send your son's body to. That was all I got. At that point in time, I was so furious that I just wanted to run through these gates. I don't think my son deserved to be done like that. I don't think anybody should have ever been done like that. I don't think this should have even happened.
Prisoners like Walter are dying at some of the highest rates the state has seen in recent years. According to federal data, Mississippi has the 4th highest mortality rate in the country.
He wasn't sleeping. He was scared. I could hear it in his voice, even though he seemed to be upbeat, but he was scared. He would say that you would be placed in positions where you have no other choice but to fight.
Mississippi prisons are so short-staffed that they often use lockdowns as a way to keep order.
Man, you can't even get no air in the window, man.
That means prisoners are kept inside their cells for almost 24 hours a day. Lockdowns can reportedly last for months.
He said, I just want you to know that I love you. And he said that like a lot of times this in December for some reason. 2020 gonna be our year, Mom. I was like, okay, baby. I said, I believe that too. 2020 is gonna be our year. He didn't tell me he wasn't gonna be here. He never told me he wasn't gonna be here.
The Department of Justice has opened an investigation into the state's prison conditions. And rapper and criminal justice advocate JayZ filed 2 lawsuits on behalf of the inmates, calling their situation a humanitarian crisis.
It's easy for you not to care about what's going on in MDOC if you don't have a family member or a loved one there. But some child's father is there. Some mother's son is there.
Kewin Grayer spent 24 years behind bars, much of that time in Parchman. Now, he's a part-time pastor.
The thing about what's going on here in Mississippi now is that there's a light on it. But these things have been taking place for years and years and years, seeing people die. Once they seen the pictures in those phones of people sleeping 6 people in one cell with no mattress, with water in the cell that doesn't work, the mold on there where your tray actually comes through, and the rats walking around these inmates while they're asleep. When they were able to actually put a picture to it, they like, wow, what these people have been talking about for so long must have really been true.
Some of us have gotten out of prison and became pillars of our community.
I got out in 2017. I now do ministry work. I'm kind of just an activist for positivity right now.
I have been where those guys are, and I know how it feels to be in those type of situations, not knowing if you will ever live to get out to see your family again.
While conditions inside Parchment are undeniably terrible, what's worse is a culture of corruption that Keywan says exists at every level.
Gang violence is at its peak there. Crooked guards and administrators is at its peak there.
There's a well-reported history of Mississippi guards working with prison gangs and smuggling in contraband.
Cell phones don't walk into prison. Knives don't walk into prison. Drugs don't walk into prison.
But consider this, Mississippi has the lowest starting pay for guards in the country. They make just under $26,000 a year. That's near the poverty line for a family of 4. Most of the officers at the state's prisons are women.
You have women with 4 or 5 children who don't have a reliable source of income, who can bring a $20 cell phone into a prison and make $1,000 off of it.
Mississippi is the poorest state in the country. It's also the blackest. Only one other state, Louisiana, locks up more people per capita. It's the legacy of decades of political rhetoric about being tough on crime.
So too, the problem of crime, one as real and deadly serious as any in America today.
In simple terms, that means we lock a lot of people up in America, more than any country in the world.
So there's no place where you can still feel the legacies of slavery more than Parchment.
Garrett Felber is a prison abolitionist and a professor of history at the University of Mississippi.
You enter through the front gates, not into a prison, but into a plantation. And you drive for miles through these disparate camps that were very much part of the antebellum South.
Parchment was built in 1901 as a labor prison modeled after a plantation. On Parchment Farm, they grew cotton, soybeans, and other cash crops. In its second full year, the state made roughly $5 million.
Parchment is a means of social control.
Ralph Eubanks is a professor of English at the University of Mississippi who also teaches classes inside the prison.
You see these vast fields there. You can have thousands of acres of cotton now, and it only takes maybe 4 people to work several thousand acres. Before, it took lots of bodies. Those bodies are still there. Once we control them by putting them into work in Parchment as part of our economic engine for the state, now we are putting them in there as a means of getting the impoverished off the street, locking them up, and basically throwing away the key.
We're having a memorial service for one of my friends who passed away a couple weeks ago. He had did 23 years in prison. He was 50 years old. He only been out 8 months. He was actually 1 week away from getting married, and he had a stroke. On the surface, he was very healthy. It's just a very dangerous environment for anybody to be in. If there is a such thing as an untimely death, I definitely look at this as one of them.
For every year you spend in prison, you'll lose 2 years of your life, according to one study.
We are still here in Parchment, Mississippi.
In Mississippi, you can get up to 15 years in additional prison time just for getting caught with a cell phone. But if it wasn't for this footage, there wouldn't be any evidence of what's happening.
Somebody need to save us, man. Somebody need to save us from this injustice, man.
Governor Tate Reeves says the inmates are using cell phones to organize violence.
That was a large part of what caused the recent series of killings to escalate as much as it did.
Professor Felber says it's not that simple.
The reality of what happens in prisons is that people do have to participate in gangs to survive. But we have to think about being denied drinkable water as state violence. That is violent because people are living in conditions that are inhuman. So when there is violence within prisons, it becomes very easy for the state to then push aside its own role and say, look, this is why we need harsher penalties, more punitive solutions, rather than acknowledging its own role in perpetuating that.
Governor Reeves failed to respond to our multiple requests for an interview. In January 2020, he announced he was shutting down most of Unit 29, widely considered to be the most inhumane in Parchment. Death row inmates will stay, and so will some lower security inmates who do maintenance work.
We say that it is the people who are in Parchment who have made it a death trap. When, if we started to probe a little bit more, we'd realize is that those of us outside of those walls who neglect it, who pay no attention to it, who drive right by as fast as we can and are silent about it, that's why it's a death trap. If we really want to try to figure out how we're going to reform our system of incarceration, we have to ask the people who are inside, what does that reform really look like?
We have to ask people like Kewin, who got married and earned a degree in theology after getting out of Parchman.
My father was killed when I was 3 years old. My mother had to try to raise 3 children by herself. You know, when you grow up in poverty-stricken situations, you tend to make decisions. There's an opportunity to do something, to stop hearing your mama cry every night, then there's nothing you won't do. I can come home every day. I can go and get something to eat out the refrigerator when I want to. I can sit down and watch a program. I can spend time with my children, just being able to walk out, smell the fresh air, and know that I'm free. And still at the back of my mind, keep it there that there are people that I love that I have left behind, who deserve a chance that I have gotten to be able to get out.
So when America began to see, this is what these people in Mississippi been talking about. For all them years I was in prison, when we was trying to send out letters and tell them folks, we need some help in here. We need some help in here.
They say the United States or America is the land of second chances. Well, there are people that I have seen that have been deprived of a second chance. My hope and my prayer and my wishes is always to see them get an opportunity and a chance to do what I have done myself, because I am an example that it is possible to get out of prison after living in such conditions, to turn a negative into a positive.
Former inmates and families of prisoners are left with the responsibility of continuing to fight for the rights of those inside.
My son's life is ended, but though it's still other people in there that still need some help. The biggest thing that he was concerned about was family. He didn't worry so much about himself. He just worried about the family. He called everybody every week to check on us, but he's the one that's locked up.
Britannia still has her son's ashes. She's waiting for the right moment to scatter them.
I released it on his birthday, which is March 21st, and he would have been 26 years old, but I wanted to be at a place that's beautiful. I want my son to be free. He was been caged up long enough, and putting somebody in a box and throwing dirt on top of him, what's the difference? How many people have to die in this place before something is done about it? I want to know why it hasn't been shut down in all of these years. I don't care who owns it. It's not about color. This is life we're dealing with. Now you want to see a side that's really about to be ugly. We're going to fight until we can't fight anymore on this one.